gonna be okay, Lena. We just need to trust the process.
I know, but what if they don't approve? Mia is everything to us.
Hey, talk to me. What's on your mind?
It's just, everything feels so uncertain lately.
We'll figure it out. Here you go, sweetie. Make sure you eat the strawberries, too.
They look yummy, Daddy.
She certainly has an appetite this morning.
Lena sat at the kitchen table, the soft morning light filtering through the window. The smell of fresh coffee lingered in the air as her daughter, Mia, ran around the living room, chasing the dog. The house felt like a warm embrace, a reflection of the life Lena and Alex had built. It was a life that seemed perfect on the outside. They had their own home, a healthy daughter, and a love that had lasted for years. It was the kind of life that others would envy, yet for some reason, Lena felt a quiet emptiness deep within her. She glanced over at Mia, who was still laughing and playing. There was a part of Lena that cherished this simple, peaceful life. But another part, a small, hidden part, wondered if this was all there was. She had been so focused on being a wife, a mother, a good employee that somewhere along the way she had forgotten who she really was. Her eyes landed on a picture of herself from years ago. She was standing on a stage, beaming with pride and ambition. There was hope in her eyes, a dream she had left behind in pursuit of a more stable, predictable life. She quickly looked away, almost as if startled by the memory. She forced a smile, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. She glanced down at her phone as an email notification popped up, breaking her moment of reflection. She took a deep breath and focused on the present: work, family, everything that made up her daily life. She tried to push the feeling of dissatisfaction aside, burying it beneath the responsibilities she wore so comfortably. But it lingered, an undercurrent she couldn't ignore. The phone rang, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was Alex. She answered with a smile, her voice light. "Hey babe, what's up?" But the voice on the other end wasn't the usual warm tone she expected. Alex sounded different. There was something urgent in his voice. "Lena, something happened." "It's Alex. There's been an accident." Lena's heart skipped a beat. "What happened? Where are you?" I'm in the hospital. Lena, please just come. It's bad." Lena's breath caught in her chest. The words didn't make sense, didn't fit with the life she knew. She grabbed her coat, her hands shaking as she rushed out of the office, her mind racing. At the hospital, everything blurred. Doctors and nurses moved quickly, but everything felt slow, like she was underwater. When the doctor finally came to speak with her, his words hit her like a freight train. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Anderson. We did everything we could, but we couldn't save him." Lena's legs buckled beneath her. She couldn't breathe. This couldn't be real. The world felt like it was crashing down around her. But that wasn't the worst of it. The worst part was when the doctor said that Alex had been hiding something from her. "I'm afraid you've also lost everything. Your finances, there were risky investments. You've lost everything, Lena. The house, your savings, all of it." The room spun as the weight of his words sank in. Not only was Alex gone, but everything they had worked for, the life they had built, was gone too. Lena stumbled out of the hospital, her world unraveling faster than she could comprehend. She didn't want to face it, but when she stepped through the front door of their home, the reality hit her. The house, the home that had once been full of love and warmth, was now a shell. People were moving their belongings out, packing everything into boxes. The furniture, the memories, the place where Mia had taken her first steps, gone. The house was being repossessed. She stood frozen in the doorway, staring at the chaos. Her heart raced, panic rising in her chest. The truth that Alex had kept from her came crashing down, and she felt a deep sense of betrayal. He had hidden debts, secrets, and now he was gone. Mia, confused and quiet, was sitting by the window watching the scene unfold. She didn't understand what was happening, but she could feel the shift in the air. Lena's throat tightened as she looked at her daughter. How could she explain this? How could she make sense of a world that had just shattered? She walked past Mia, her mind numb. Every part of her life felt like a lie. She had trusted Alex, trusted the life they had built, and now it was all gone. She collapsed onto the couch, her eyes welling with tears, and for the first time in a long while, Lena felt the weight of everything. The grief, the betrayal, the loss, all crashing down on her. Days passed in a blur. Lena went through the motions of daily life, but her heart wasn't in it. She didn't know who she was anymore. She couldn't find the strength to look at her daughter without feeling like a failure. Mia needed her, but Lena didn't know how to be the mother she needed. The anger, the grief, the guilt, they all consumed her. Lena isolated herself, retreating into a silence that felt deafening. She spent hours staring out the window, lost in thoughts she didn't know how to make sense of. Every morning was a struggle. She didn't know how to move forward, didn't know how to heal. Mia, feeling the absence of her mother, began to act out. She didn't understand why Daddy wasn't coming home. Why was everything changing? Lena couldn't answer her, couldn't offer comfort. She was too wrapped up in her own pain to give Mia the support she needed. One afternoon, Lena's old friend Ella came over, the first time they had spoken in months. Ella could see it, Lena was falling apart. "You need help, Lena," Ella said gently. "You can't keep doing this on your own." Lena looked at her friend, her heart heavy. She wanted to fight it, wanted to keep pretending she could handle it, but she couldn't anymore. "I don't know where to start, Ella," Lena whispered, her voice breaking. "I don't know who I am anymore." Ella reached across the table, her hand resting gently on Lena's. "Start with you. You've been so busy being everything for everyone else, you've forgotten who you are. Let me help you find her again." Lena broke down, the weight of her grief finally escaping. She realized in that moment that she had been living for everyone but herself. The first step toward healing had begun. Lena started seeing a therapist. At first, it felt uncomfortable, like she was stepping into unfamiliar territory, like admitting she needed help was a sign of weakness. But as the days passed, something inside her began to shift. The therapist, a kind woman named Dr. Pierce, encouraged Lena to open up about her feelings, not just about Alex's death, but about everything. The life she had built, the role she had taken on, the woman she had forgotten to be. In her sessions, Lena confronted the parts of herself she had buried. Her dreams, her passions, her desire to be something more than just a wife and mother. The more she talked, the more she began to realize how much she had neglected herself in the pursuit of keeping everything together. She had buried her own identity, wrapped up in the image of a perfect family, a perfect life. But what was left of that life now? She didn't know. There were moments when the pain felt unbearable, but with every tear, every confession, Lena began to feel a small sense of relief. She wasn't just grieving the loss of Alex, she was grieving the parts of herself that had been lost along the way. But slowly she was starting to find pieces of herself again, bits of hope scattered in the darkness. One evening, after a particularly long therapy session, Lena walked home in the cool evening air. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the empty streets. She had never noticed how beautiful the world could be, even in the midst of sorrow. As she walked, a thought struck her. She had always wanted to write. When she was younger, before life had consumed her, writing was her passion. But she had let it slip away just like everything else. Lena stood still, letting the thought settle in her mind. She had spent so long trying to fit into the life that was expected of her, wife, mother, professional, that she had forgotten what it felt like to dream. The idea of writing, of telling her story, ignited something inside her. Maybe this was the way forward. When she got home, Lena sat at her kitchen table, and for the first time in a long while, she took out her old notebook, a journal she had kept in her younger days. She opened it, feeling the weight of the pages in her hands, and began to write. She wrote about the pain, the loss, the betrayal. She wrote about Alex, about Mia, about the life she had lost. It was messy, raw, and unpolished, but it felt real. It felt like the first step toward reclaiming who she was. Over the next few weeks, Lena kept writing. She joined a local writing group, where she found people who shared her love for words, people who encouraged her to keep going. Slowly, she rediscovered the passion that had once burned brightly inside her. Writing became her escape, her catharsis. But it wasn't just about the writing, it was about finding herself again. In every word, in every sentence, Lena began to feel a sense of purpose. She realized that this was the part of herself she had been missing, the part that had always dreamed of creating, of expressing herself in a way that was uniquely hers. And through it all, Lena made an effort to be present for Mia. They began to take long walks together, talking about everything and nothing. The connection between them, though still fragile, started to heal. It wasn't easy, and there were still days when Lena felt overwhelmed by the weight of everything, but Mia's innocence and love reminded her that there was still joy to be found, even in the darkest of times. As Lena's writing began to gain traction, her confidence grew. She started to share her work online, posting short stories about her experiences. The feedback she received was overwhelming. Strangers reached out, telling her how much her words had touched them. For the first time in a long while, Lena felt like she was doing something that mattered. One evening, after receiving several messages of support, Lena sat with Mia in the living room, reading one of her stories aloud. As she read, she realized how far she had come. The grief, the loss, the feeling of being lost, it was all still there, but it no longer defined her. She had found a new purpose, a new way of living. She was more than the woman who had lost everything in one day. She was the woman who had found her way back to herself. That night, as Lena tucked Mia into bed, she kissed her daughter's forehead and whispered, "We're going to be okay." Lena stood by the window of their small apartment, looking out at the city below. The wind blew gently, carrying with it the promise of something new. Mia was playing in the park across the street, her laughter ringing in the air. Lena watched her, feeling a quiet sense of peace settle within her. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy. Life would continue to challenge her, as it always did. But for the first time in a long while, Lena felt ready to face whatever came next. She had found a new purpose, a new path, one that wasn't defined by loss or pain, but by the possibility of growth and healing. And as the wind blew softly around her, she knew she was no longer just the woman who had lost everything in one day. She was the woman who had found herself again. And that was enough. Lena spent the next few months slowly rebuilding her life, piece by piece. With every word she wrote, she grew stronger, more confident in herself. The grief still came in waves, unexpected and powerful, but it no longer controlled her. She had learned how to ride out the storms, knowing that the calm would eventually return. Her relationship with Mia continued to improve. Mia was a bright light in Lena's life, a reminder of the love she had once shared with Alex, and of the love that was still possible. They spent time together, creating new memories, and Lena made an effort to show her daughter that life could still be beautiful, even in the face of hardship. One afternoon, as they sat in the park, Lena watched Mia play on the swings, her laughter ringing out in the crisp autumn air. Lena felt a smile tug at the corners of her mouth. Mia had always been the anchor that kept her grounded. She was her reason to keep going, her reason to find the strength to move forward. Lena had started to write a book about her experiences, documenting her journey from loss to healing. The process was cathartic but also challenging. She had to relive the pain of Alex's death and the betrayal she had felt, but in doing so, she began to understand herself in ways she never had before. She realized that healing didn't mean forgetting the past. It meant accepting it, learning from it, and finding a way to live with it. One evening, as Lena sat at her desk typing the final lines of her manuscript, there was a knock on the door. She opened it to find Ella standing there, a warm smile on her face. "I thought I'd check in on you," Ella said, stepping inside. "How's it going?" Lena smiled, feeling a sense of gratitude. Ella had been a constant support throughout this journey, always there when Lena needed her. She had encouraged her to write, to seek therapy, and to find herself again. "It's going well," Lena said, her voice tinged with pride. "I'm almost done with the book. It's been hard, but it feels right, you know? Like I'm finally doing something that's mine." Ella nodded, sitting down on the couch. "I'm so proud of you, Lena. You've come a long way." Lena sat down beside her, feeling the weight of the past months lifting off her shoulders. "I never thought I'd get here. After everything that happened, I thought I was broken. But I'm not. I'm still here." Ella reached over and took Lena's hand. "You're stronger than you think. You've always been stronger than you realized." Lena looked down at their intertwined hands, feeling a quiet sense of peace. She had spent so much time doubting herself, thinking she wasn't enough. But she was. She had always been enough. As the conversation turned to lighter topics, Lena felt a warmth spread through her chest. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she belonged. She was not just the woman who had lost everything, but the woman who had rebuilt her life from the ground up. Later that evening, after Ella left, Lena sat down with Mia, reading one of her stories. Mia's eyes shone with pride as she listened to her mother's voice fill the room. There was so much more to Lena's life than she had once thought. She had found a new path, one that was filled with purpose and meaning. Lena knew that the future would still hold challenges, but she was ready. She was no longer defined by her past, by the man she had loved or the life she had lost. She had found her voice again, and with it, she was ready to embrace whatever came next. As the night drew to a close, Lena stood by the window, watching Mia sleep peacefully in her room. The wind was still, but Lena could feel the quiet strength inside her, the peace that had slowly settled in her heart. Life would continue to test her, but she knew now that she had the power to face whatever came her way. And for the first time in years, Lena felt truly free. Weeks passed, and Lena's life continued its slow but steady transformation. She had started to share her writing more openly, posting her stories online and even submitting a few to local magazines. The response was overwhelmingly positive. People connected with her words, with her raw honesty, and her story of overcoming loss. It was surreal to Lena that something so deeply personal could touch so many. But it felt good too. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. Her confidence grew as she received feedback from readers. They would tell her how much they appreciated her vulnerability, how they found strength in her stories. It wasn't just the stories she told about grief or betrayal, but about healing and hope, the kind of hope she had fought so hard to find in herself. One morning, as Lena sat at her desk typing the final chapter of her book, Mia came running into the room. "Mom, I made you something," she exclaimed, her eyes wide with excitement. Lena smiled, pausing her typing. "What did you make, sweetie?" Mia held up a crumpled piece of paper and with a grin, handed it to her. "It's for you." Lena unfolded the paper to find a drawing of a sun, with bright yellow rays shining down over a picture of their house. In the center of the sun was a smiley face, and around it, Mia had written, "I love you, Mommy." Lena's heart swelled and she pulled her daughter into her arms. "I love you too, sweetheart. You're my sunshine." Mia hugged her tightly before running off to play, leaving Lena holding the drawing in her hands. Her eyes filled with tears, but these were different, tears of gratitude, not sorrow. She had come so far, and so had Mia. They had both healed in ways they hadn't thought possible. Later that day, Lena sat down with her manuscript. The final draft was nearly complete. She had poured everything into it, the love, the loss, the anger, and the healing. This book wasn't just for her anymore. It was for everyone who had ever felt like they were drowning in grief, for anyone who had ever felt like they didn't know how to go on after tragedy. It was a testament to the power of transformation, to the fact that even in the darkest times, there was always the possibility of light. Lena clicked save on her computer and stared at the screen for a long moment. She couldn't help but feel proud. For months, she had wondered who she was, what her purpose was. Now she knew. She was a writer. She was a mother. And most importantly, she was a woman who had rediscovered herself after everything had fallen apart. That night, as the wind howled outside, Lena and Mia sat together in the living room, surrounded by the soft glow of the lamps. Lena picked up a book she had written, her fingers tracing the title, and looked over at Mia, who was curled up next to her. The warmth of the moment was overwhelming. "You're doing amazing, Mommy," Mia said softly, as though reading her thoughts. Lena smiled. "Thanks, Mia. You're my biggest inspiration." They sat in companionable silence, both of them knowing that their lives would continue to change, but that they would face whatever came next together. Lena no longer felt alone, no longer defined by the past that had broken her. She had learned to embrace the uncertainty of the future, knowing that she could rebuild anything if given the chance. As the days turned into weeks, Lena's book was finally published. The release felt like the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. She received messages from people who had read it, who thanked her for sharing her story. Their words reminded her that her journey hadn't just been her own. It had resonated with so many others. It wasn't easy, nothing about this process had been, but with every story shared, with every connection made, Lena felt herself growing stronger. She had built something beautiful from the ashes of her past. And while she knew the journey wasn't over, she also knew she was no longer just surviving. She was living. One evening, as she sat in front of her computer, typing the first few lines of a new story, Lena paused. Outside, the sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the city. Mia was at the park with friends, laughing and playing as if the world hadn't been so cruel to them. Lena took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything she had gone through and everything she had gained. She had rediscovered the woman she had lost. She had found her voice again. And as she watched the last rays of the sun disappear behind the horizon, Lena realized something else. The journey was far from over. But this time she wasn't afraid. She was ready to face whatever came next. With her heart full of hope and a story still to tell, she turned back to her keyboard and began to write the next chapter of her life. And for the first time in a long time, Lena felt like the story was hers to control. Lena's life settled into a new rhythm. The days were no longer filled with the haze of grief that had consumed her in the months after Alex's death. She still missed him, there would always be a part of her that would, but she had found something new, something that was entirely hers. Her writing had become a lifeline, an expression of everything she had been through, and the people who reached out to her, who told her how her words had helped them, filled her with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. Every morning, she would wake up early before Mia, making a cup of coffee and sitting at her desk to write. The words came more easily now. The pain, the heartache, the sense of being lost, it still lingered in the background, but it was no longer the thing that defined her. She had found a way to channel it into something powerful. And Mia, though still adjusting to the changes, was growing stronger too. The two of them were learning how to heal together. One afternoon, as Lena was wrapping up a new short story, she received an email that would change everything. It was from a publishing company, one that had read her work online. They wanted to offer her a book deal. Her heart pounded in her chest as she read through the email again. Was this real? Could this really be happening? It was the opportunity she had dreamed about when she was younger, when she was filled with ambition and hope. Now it was a dream that had come true, but it was a dream born from loss, from pain, from a journey she never expected to take. Lena sat back in her chair, staring at the screen. 1,000 thoughts raced through her mind. She wasn't just writing to heal anymore, she was writing to change the course of her life. She had something to offer, something that could help others find their own strength just as she had. This wasn't just a book deal, it was a chance to reach people in a way she hadn't thought possible. The days that followed were a blur. Lena signed the contract, working with her editor to fine-tune her manuscript. She spent long hours at her desk, poring over every page, making sure that her story, her truth, was captured in every word. She was no longer just telling her story for herself. She was telling it for the millions of people who had been where she had been, lost, broken, uncertain of how to keep going. And as the publication date approached, Lena found herself once again on the edge of something new. The book was almost finished, but the woman who had started it, the woman who had been broken by grief, was no longer the same. She had rebuilt herself step by step, word by word. She had rediscovered her purpose, her passion, and most importantly, her voice. One evening, as Lena and Mia were sitting together, reading one of Lena's finished stories, Mia asked a simple question. "Mom, do you think Daddy would be proud of you?" Lena felt her heart swell. She thought of Alex, his ambition, his love for her, the dreams they had shared. And even though he was gone, even though everything had changed, Lena knew he would be proud of her. He had always believed in her, even when she hadn't believed in herself. She smiled at Mia, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I think he'd be really proud, Mia. He always believed in me, and now I believe in myself too." Mia smiled back, her eyes filled with the innocence that only a child could have. "I'm proud of you, Mommy." Lena hugged her tightly, feeling the weight of everything she had been through. And for the first time she felt the full impact of her own strength. She had come so far. She had weathered the storm, and now she was standing in the light. The launch day. The day the book was released, Lena felt a mixture of excitement and fear. She had always dreamed of being published, but now that it was finally happening, it felt surreal. She stood at her desk, looking at the stack of printed copies of her book. Each one represented a piece of her heart, a chapter of her life that she had shared with the world. Mia, now a little older, stood beside her, holding her hand. "Are you ready, Mommy?" Lena smiled and nodded. "I think so. It's a big day, but we'll take it one step at a time." She clicked a button on her computer and her book went live for sale. The first few sales trickled in and her heart fluttered with anticipation. But then the emails started pouring in, people reaching out to thank her, to tell her how much her words had touched them. It wasn't just the people who had followed her writing online. It was people from all over, people who had been through their own struggles and who found something in her story that resonated with them. Lena read through the messages, her heart overflowing. She had done it. She had not only healed herself but had helped others heal along the way. She wasn't just writing about her grief, she was writing about hope, about redemption, and about the power of starting over, no matter what life threw at you. As the evening approached, Lena looked out the window, watching the last light of day fade into night. Mia was outside with friends, running and laughing. The world was still turning and Lena was still here. She had found her way back to herself. She had found a new purpose, a new path. And for the first time in a long time, Lena felt completely whole. The phone rang, pulling her from her thoughts. It was Ella. "You did it," Ella said, her voice full of pride. "I always knew you had it in you." Lena smiled, her heart full. "I couldn't have done it without you, Ella. You were there when I needed to find myself again." Ella's voice softened. "We all need someone to remind us of who we are. You've reminded the world, Lena. You've reminded yourself." Lena looked out the window again, this time with a sense of quiet triumph. She was no longer the woman who had lost everything in one day. She was the woman who had found a way to rebuild, to heal, to create something new from the broken pieces of her past. And that was enough. As the stars began to twinkle in the sky above, Lena closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. Life would continue to test her, but she was ready. She had faced the worst, and now she was ready to embrace whatever came next. This was her story, her life, and she was finally the one who held the pen. Months passed, and the success of Lena's book continued to grow. The feedback, the praise, and the messages of support from readers only fueled her desire to keep writing. She wasn't just sharing stories anymore. She was creating a community, a space where people could find comfort in each other's pain and healing. It was as if she had opened a door for herself and for others, and through that door came a new world of possibilities. Mia was growing up too, and though the years had been difficult, their bond had never been stronger. The two of them had come through the worst together, and Lena often found herself marveling at how much they had both healed. They took trips together now, small ones like to the beach or the local zoo. These moments of joy, of simple connection, reminded Lena that life wasn't just about the struggles. It was about the quiet, beautiful moments in between. One afternoon, as Lena sat in the park, working on her new manuscript, her phone buzzed with a notification. It was from Ella. Ella's text. Big news. Guess who wants to interview you for a podcast about resilience? They want to talk about your book and how you turned your life around. You're changing lives, Lena. Lena stared at the message, a smile tugging at her lips. It had been a while since she had felt this kind of excitement. It wasn't just about the book anymore. It was about sharing her story on a larger scale, reaching more people. It was about taking the lessons she had learned from her darkest days and using them to make a difference in the world. After a few moments of hesitation, Lena typed her reply. Lena's text. I'm scared, Ella. But maybe it's time to stop hiding. Let's do it. The podcast interview. The day of the podcast interview arrived, and Lena was a bundle of nerves. The studio was sleek, modern, and filled with an energy that buzzed in the air. She had never done anything like this before, and the thought of sharing her story in front of a large audience made her stomach flip. But as she sat down in front of the microphone, the host, Danielle, greeted her with a warm smile and welcoming words. Danielle's kindness and easy manner immediately put Lena at ease. So, Lena, Danielle began, I've read your book and it's incredible. You've written about some truly difficult things, loss, betrayal, grief, but also about hope and redemption. What I want to know is what kept you going through it all. Lena took a deep breath, thinking for a moment before answering. I think it was the realization that I had two choices, she began slowly. I could either let the loss of everything break me completely, or I could choose to rebuild. I wasn't just rebuilding a house or a life, I was rebuilding myself. And that's what kept me going, the belief that even when everything falls apart, there's always something inside you that's strong enough to hold it all together. The words felt true, raw, and real as they left her lips. This was no longer just a story she was telling for the sake of writing. It was a truth she had lived. Danielle nodded thoughtfully. That's such a powerful message. You know, so many people are afraid of facing their pain. They think it's too much to handle, too overwhelming. But you're showing that it's possible to come out the other side stronger, right? Lena smiled, the warmth of the conversation making her feel lighter. It's hard. I won't lie. There were days when I felt like I couldn't go on. But the truth is, we all have more strength than we realize. Sometimes you just have to be willing to take the first step, even if it's small. And sometimes that first step is just letting yourself feel the pain, letting it out, and then moving forward from it. As the interview continued, Lena found herself opening up in ways she hadn't anticipated. Talking about her journey, her struggles, and the eventual healing felt like shedding another layer of the person she had been. It wasn't just her story anymore. It was a universal story, one that connected her to so many others who had experienced their own versions of heartbreak. By the time the podcast ended, Lena felt a sense of accomplishment that went beyond what she had expected. She wasn't just telling her story, she was empowering others to find their own strength. The launch of the podcast. After the podcast aired, Lena received messages from all over the world. People shared their own stories of struggle, of loss, of transformation. Many thanked her for her honesty, for showing them that it was okay to not have all the answers, but to keep going anyway. One message stood out among the rest. It was from a woman named Sarah, who had been listening to the podcast during a difficult time in her life. Sarah wrote about how Lena's words had given her the courage to start therapy, to begin healing from her own trauma. I'm taking the first step, Sarah had written, and it's because of you. Lena read the message over and over, her heart swelling. She had never imagined that her journey, her personal pain, could touch someone else so deeply. She had spent so much time feeling lost, so much time thinking she had nothing left to give. But now she realized that by sharing her story she had given others a gift, the gift of hope. A new chapter. A few months later, Lena sat at her desk, preparing for the release of her second book, a collection of essays on healing and resilience. This new book was different from the first. It was about the small, everyday victories, about how the moments of healing weren't always grand or dramatic, but sometimes came in the quiet spaces between the storms. Mia walked in holding a drawing she had made. It was of a tree, its roots deep in the ground with branches reaching toward the sky. "Look, Mommy. It's our tree," Mia said, her eyes shining with pride. Lena smiled, her heart full. "It's beautiful, Mia. Just like you." Mia climbed up into Lena's lap, snuggling close. Together they looked at the tree, both of them understanding the significance. Just like the tree, they had weathered storms. But through it all they had grown stronger. And now they were ready for whatever came next. Lena ran her fingers through Mia's hair, a quiet peace settling over her. She had lost everything once. But now she had found something even more precious. A purpose, a voice, and a future. She had come a long way. And no matter what the future held, she knew she was ready. Lena leaned down and kissed Mia on the forehead, whispering softly, "We're going to be okay, sweetheart. We're going to be more than okay." And as she looked out the window, watching the world continue to move forward, she knew this was only the beginning. There would be more to overcome, more to learn, and more to give. But for the first time in a long time, Lena felt confident in herself, in her story, and in the future they would create together. Lena's life continued to unfold in ways she had never imagined. Her second book had become a success, and with it came new opportunities, speaking engagements, workshops, and even collaborations with other authors and organizations focused on healing and resilience. People were reaching out from all over, eager to hear her speak, to learn from her, to share their own stories. Lena found herself in a place she never expected to be, not just a survivor of her own grief, but a guide for others who were learning to navigate their own pain. The podcast episode that had originally seemed like such a daunting challenge had become a turning point. It was no longer just a single conversation. It was the beginning of something much bigger. Lena was invited to speak on more platforms, to share her story in more places. The world seemed to be listening, and Lena, once terrified to even voice her pain, was now embracing the role of storyteller with confidence. But amidst all the newfound success, Lena never lost sight of the most important part of her life, her relationship with Mia. The two of them continued to grow together, finding their own rhythm in the new life they had built. Mia had become more than just the bright spot in Lena's world. She had become a constant source of strength. Every time Lena faltered, Mia was there to remind her of what really mattered. One evening, as Lena was finishing a new chapter for her next book, Mia came into the room, holding something behind her back. "Mom," Mia said, her voice slightly hesitant. "I made you something." Lena smiled and set her pen down. "What is it, sweetie?" Mia pulled out a small handmade book, its pages filled with crayon drawings of their family, Lena, Mia, the dog, and even Alex, who still had a place in their hearts. On the cover, Mia had written, "Mom's Greatest Stories." Lena's heart skipped a beat. She opened the book, flipping through the pages as Mia looked on with excitement. Each page contained simple drawings, but they were filled with love and meaning. Moments of happiness, moments of struggle, moments of quiet joy. At the end of the book, Mia had written a note. "Mom, I love you. You're my hero. You're the best writer ever." Lena's eyes welled with tears. She pulled Mia into her arms, holding her tightly. "I love you so much, Mia. You're my hero too." They sat there together, wrapped in the warmth of the moment. Lena realized that while her journey had been filled with challenges, it had also brought her closer to the person she was always meant to be. She had found her voice not just as a writer, but as a mother, a friend, and a woman who had overcome the darkest parts of herself. A new opportunity. One afternoon, Lena received an email that would change the direction of her career. It was from a renowned publisher who had read her latest book and was interested in working with her on a larger project. One that focused on not just her personal story, but on helping others find healing through creative expression. They wanted Lena to create a workshop series, combining her writing and storytelling with practical tools for people struggling with grief, loss, and rebuilding their lives. The idea of creating something like this was both exciting and terrifying. It meant stepping into a new space, a space that required not only vulnerability but also a deep commitment to helping others. But Lena knew that this was the next step in her journey. She had learned so much from her own healing process, and now she had the chance to help others navigate their own paths. The publisher offered a partnership that would allow her to travel and hold workshops across the country. It was a big decision, one that would take her out of her comfort zone, away from her quiet life with Mia. But Lena knew that this was an opportunity she couldn't pass up. She had spent so long hiding from the world, from her own power, and now she was ready to embrace it. That night, after Mia had gone to bed, Lena sat alone in the living room, reflecting on how far she had come. She thought about the woman she was before, the woman who felt lost, broken, and unable to see a future beyond her pain. And she thought about the woman she was now, the woman who had found strength in her vulnerability, who had rebuilt her life from the ground up, and who was ready to use her story to help others. Lena picked up the phone and called Ella. "I got the offer," she said, her voice trembling with excitement. "They want me to create a workshop series. It's everything I've ever wanted." "That's amazing, Lena," Ella said, her voice filled with pride. "I knew you had it in you. You're not just writing a story anymore, you're changing lives." Lena smiled, feeling the weight of those words sink in. She wasn't just writing anymore. She was living her purpose. The workshop series. The first workshop was a success beyond Lena's expectations. The room was filled with people. Some were grieving the loss of loved ones, some had experienced trauma, others were struggling to find meaning in the aftermath of pain. Lena stood at the front of the room, sharing her story, her lessons, and her belief that healing was possible, even in the darkest of times. There was a moment during the workshop when Lena asked everyone to take out a piece of paper and write down one thing they needed to let go of in order to move forward. As people began to share their answers, Lena could feel the collective energy in the room shift. There was power in vulnerability, in sharing what had been held in silence for so long. Lena had been where they were. She had felt that pain, that loss, that emptiness. But she also knew that it was possible to rise above it, to rebuild, to create something new. By the end of the workshop, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. People came up to her afterward, thanking her for giving them the courage to face their own grief. One woman in particular pulled Lena aside, tears in her eyes. "I've been holding on to my husband's death for so long," the woman said, her voice shaking. "I didn't know how to move forward. But today I feel like I can. Thank you." Lena's heart swelled with gratitude. This was why she had done it. This was why she had shared her story, even when it felt too painful to do so. Because through that pain there was power. There was healing. The future. As Lena traveled across the country, holding workshops, writing more books, and sharing her story, she continued to grow. She learned from every person she met, every story she heard. The connections she made with others, the stories they shared with her, became part of her own healing process. She had come to understand that healing was not just an individual journey, it was a collective one. And by sharing her story, by helping others share theirs, she was contributing to something far bigger than herself. One evening, after another successful workshop, Lena sat in her hotel room, thinking about how much had changed. She looked at her phone, where a picture of Mia smiled back at her. Her daughter was growing up so fast, but Lena knew that no matter where life took them, they would always be together, stronger than ever. The phone rang again, this time a call from the publishing company. They wanted to expand their collaboration even further. They had seen the impact of her workshops, and now they wanted her to create a full-scale program, something that would reach even more people, a platform for healing that would bring together writers, artists, and storytellers from all walks of life. Lena smiled as she hung up the phone. She had started this journey feeling broken, unsure of herself, unsure of the future. But now she knew that her story wasn't just hers to tell, it was a story that could help heal the world. And for the first time, Lena understood that her purpose wasn't just about surviving, it was about thriving, helping others thrive, and creating a future that was bright with possibility. As she looked out the window at the city lights below, Lena felt ready for whatever came next. She had faced the darkness and now she was walking in the light. And this time she was not alone.